On April the 16th of 2017, William Hargrove murdered his 27-year-old Russian fiancée, Anna Repkina, in Alsea, Oregon, leaving behind a KFC receipt that would ultimately lead to his arrest. Repkina and Hargrove had met through a dating app in 2016 and sparked up a relationship while he carried on an affair with his married landlady, Michelle Chavez. The latter grew jealous of Hargrove's engagement and gave him an ultimatum, urging him to choose between her and Repkina, who'd moved permanently to the US to live with the man. According to Chavez, she'd expected him to break off the engagement and believed Hargrove when he said that Repkina had returned to Russia. In reality, he'd gunned her down and left her body in a secluded wooded area. Police discovered her remains on April the 17th. Among the debris, investigators found a KFC receipt containing Hargrove's information. The suspect had also reportedly withdrawn money from Repkina's bank account and was thus arrested on suspicion of carrying out the killing. Hargrove was found guilty of first-degree murder and identity theft and consequently sentenced to life in prison. Number 9. Grant Matthew Hardin. Arkansas man James Appleton died at the hands of former Gateway Police Chief Grant Matthew Hardin on February the 23rd of 2017, an incident which in turn helped the police solve a 20-year-old cold case. According to eyewitnesses, Hardin, aged 48 at the time, drove by Appleton's parked truck and fatally shot him before speeding away. The culprit wasn't immediately considered a likely suspect, having worked as a police officer in Fayetteville, Huntsville, and Eureka Springs before taking on the role of police chief in Gateway. All of the evidence gathered by the small town's detectives, however, pointed to Hardin, who was unable to provide an alibi for the day of the shooting. On October the 16th of 2017, the man pleaded guilty to first-degree murder as part of a plea deal with the prosecution, although he refused to reveal his motive for targeting Appleton in the first place. Hardin was sentenced to 30 years in prison, and his DNA was uploaded to the FBI's genetic database. The system subsequently linked the man to a previously unsolved 1997 assault. In November of that year, an elementary school teacher had been attacked at gunpoint by a man wearing a stocking cap and glasses. The assailant remained unidentified until Hardin's DNA was matched to the sample mixture retrieved from the original crime scene. In 2019, he once again agreed to a plea deal and was sentenced to an additional 50 years with the possibility of parole after 35 years served. Number 8. Shawnetta Reese. Middle school gym teacher Shawnetta Reese of Blairsville, Georgia, was arrested on September the 21st of 2017 for allegedly having intimate relations with students. The 40-year-old woman who worked at Union County Middle School was detained after police received information regarding an inappropriate relationship she'd had with an underage student back in 2013. Reese consequently faced a count of assault by persons with supervisory authority, along with other charges related to the matter. In a joint investigation conducted by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and the Union County Sheriff's Office, a second unlawful relationship was uncovered from 2015 in which Reese had been involved with an 18-year-old student. As of November of 2022, it's unclear how the case's legal proceedings ultimately played out. Number 7. Walter Miller. In January of 2015, fugitive bank robber Walter Miller was arrested at his home in Brooklyn, New York, where he'd been living under the assumed name Bobby Love, alongside his wife of 30 years, Cheryl. The 51-year-old woman was shocked when police raided their apartment, accusing her husband of being on the run from the law since 1977. Miller had been arrested in North Carolina back in 1971 for armed robbery and sentenced to between 25 and 30 years in prison. 7 years later, he escaped while being transported to a work site and traveled to New York, where he assumed his new identity. He married his wife in 1985 and fathered 4 children, keeping his criminal past a secret from his new family. That all changed when at the age of 63 he was rearrested and extradited to North Carolina in 2015. Miller was released a year later with his parole period scheduled to last until 2024. His wife remained by his side throughout the entire process, publicly indicating that she'd forgiven him for lying about his true identity. The couple co-authored a book that was released in 2022, detailing their unique journey and relationship. Number 6. Theodore John Conrad. On July the 14th of 1969, 20-year-old Theodore John Conrad, disappeared after embezzling $215,000 from a bank in Cleveland, Ohio, where he worked as a teller. Adjusting the sum for inflation, the amount with which Conrad absconded translated to $1.59 million in 2021. On Friday the 11th, Conrad entered the bank's vault and placed the money in a paper bag. The theft wasn't discovered until the following Monday. By the time police linked Conrad to the crime, he'd already fled the state and assumed a new identity. A warrant was issued for his arrest on charges of embezzlement and making a false entry in a bank's record. But for 5 decades, he remained at large, secretly living in Massachusetts under the assumed name Thomas Randell. As Randell, the man got married, fathered a daughter, and ran a country club's golf course, before later working at a luxury automobile dealership. In November of 2021, Deputy Marshal Peter J. Elliott, the son of one of the investigators assigned to the original case, found an obituary for Randell published after his death on May the 18th of that year. Elliott noticed the similarities between the information mentioned in the obituary and what he already knew about Conrad's life before his disappearance. Randell's wife and daughter later admitted that he'd revealed his true identity on his deathbed, but neither woman was charged for withholding his confession. Number 5. Laura Whitehurst. On July the 1st of 2013, 28-year-old Laura Elizabeth Whitehurst, an English teacher from California, was taken into police custody for abusing one of her students. The arrest occurred only days after the woman had given birth to a baby fathered by the victim. Investigators discovered texts Whitehurst had sent to the student, identified only as John B.B. Doe, calling her pregnancy a miracle and referring to the young man as Daddy, facing a potential 29-year prison sentence if she took her case to trial. The teacher agreed to a plea deal with the prosecution and was thus sentenced to a year in prison. She was released after serving only 6 months. Whitehurst's probationary term lasted until 2019, but she will remain on the offender registry for the rest of her life. The victim filed a civil lawsuit against Whitehurst and the school district, accusing a fellow teacher, Sarah Sievers, of doing nothing despite knowing about the relationship. In August of 2016, a student was awarded a $6 million settlement from the school district. 2 other students made similar accusations against Whitehurst following her arrest, and additional lawsuits were subsequently filed. Number 4. Nicholas Rossi. On November the 11th of 2022, a Scottish court ruled that the man known as Arthur Knight was actually the infamous fugitive Nicholas Rossi, who'd fled from Salt Lake City, Utah in 2020 after being accused of assault. Rossi had spent a year fighting the charges levied against him, claiming that he was a victim of mistaken identity. Investigators positively identified him as the culprit, however, relying on his distinctive tattoos and fingerprints as evidence. The man claimed that the body art was part of a setup, telling authorities that someone had tattooed him while he lay unconscious in the hospital for COVID. During questioning, Rossi mysteriously kept changing his accent and fired several attorneys over the course of the ensuing legal proceedings. A hearing was set for March of 2023 to determine whether the suspect would be extradited back to the US to stand trial for the alleged 2008 assault of a 21-year-old woman. He's believed to have assumed several different aliases in the past, including Nicholas Alaverdian Rossi, Nick Allen, Nicholas Brown, and Arthur Brown. Number 3. Lewis Flood. On July the 13th of 2022, Idaho man Lewis Flood was arrested in British Columbia, Canada, after being on the run for over 20 years. Flood had been convicted of abuse in 1997 and sentenced to 18 years in prison, fled the state of Idaho after being released on parole. Only 3 years after his incarceration, Constable Dave Bickle, who made the arrest, identified Flood from a photograph taken 21 years earlier. On July the 25th, the man was extradited to the U.S. and taken into the custody of the U.S. Marshal Service Fugitive Transport Unit. For breaking the conditions of his parole, Flood was ordered to serve out the remaining 13 years of his original sentence. Today's topic was requested by Bancho. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Melissa Louise Caddick. 41-year-old Melissa Louise Caddick fled from her home in Sydney, Australia on November the 12th of 2020, the day after police had raided the place. The woman was accused of embezzling over $30 million from investors, some of whom were described as her friends and family members. Between 2012 to 2019, Caddick perpetrated a Ponzi scheme, depositing people's investments into 37 different bank accounts, using victims' funds to pay off old investors. Investigators believe she used the ill-gotten money to purchase 2 houses, cars, designer clothes, and jewelry. Authorities issued a warrant for her arrest but were unable to determine her whereabouts until February the 21st of 2021, when human remains were found which were ultimately linked to Caddick. A human foot with the same type of shoe Caddick had been wearing during the raid of her residence was found in the coast of Bermagui. A DNA test conducted by forensic investigators confirmed detectives' suspicions. Although each of the criminal charges were dropped after her death, Caddick's home and other assets were sold to repay the 72 victims of her financial fraud. The precise circumstances of the woman's death remained unknown as of the most recent updates. Number 1. Fatina Hossein. A teaching assistant from Sussex, England, was arrested in June of 2020 after luring an underage student into a months-long romantic relationship. 25-year-old Fatina Hossein reportedly manipulated the victim into continuing their involvement by threatening his family and falsely claiming to be pregnant. She even tried to bribe the student to keep him from reporting her to the authorities. Following her eventual arrest, Hossein set up several social media accounts, which she used for the sole purpose of threatening other students from testifying against her, as well as faking an inappropriate correspondence between an underage girl and one of her victim's family members. Detectives assigned to the case investigated the allegations against the student's relative, ultimately determined in March of 2021 that Hossein had falsified the messages. On October the 21st of that same year, she was sentenced to 5 years and 4 months in prison and registered as an offender. Presiding Judge Jeremy Gold issued a permanent restraining order preventing Hossein from making any form of contact with the victim or his family. Thanks for watching. If you found out your best friend was involved in a serious but non-fatal hit and run, would you rat them out if they refused to turn themselves in? Let us know in the comments section below.